Kris and Mads, sisters who love a good story.
The only thing better than experiencing a good story is talking about it.
We're here for the unfiltered, unhinged conversations with fellow story lovers and storytellers.
And the occasional rant or rave about the shit that rips our hearts out and puts us back together again.
The stuff that makes us laugh till we pee our pants.
And the ones that teach us what it is to be human. Welcome to the sisterhood. Welcome to the show, you guys. Today we are very excited because Gareth Brown is joining us. He is the debut author of the internationally best-selling Book of Doors, which Kristen and I loved, rated 5 stars, could not shut up about. And so we are thrilled that he is here today to talk to us about his book, his writing process, being a debut author, all of the things. And to start out, of course, we're going to ask him for 2 truths and a lie.
Okay.
To see if he can deceive us. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you for inviting me. Lovely to be here. Okay, so my first truth or lie is when I was younger, I used to compete in the Highland Games here in Scotland. I'm from Scotland. And I used to be very good at the hammer throw. That's my first one.
Okay.
My second truth or lie is I was once invited to speak at the White House in Washington, D.C. That's my third one. Second one. And my third one is I once swam between the tectonic plates, the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates.
My gosh, that's crazy.
I feel like all of these are lies.
There's no way.
There's no way.
What? Hold on. I mean, I could kind of see the Highland Games thing. I don't know why, but I could see you doing this.
The hammer throw?
But I do feel like people throw the lie out first a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I know. It's like your default. You got to just throw that out there to get it over with. But also, like, invited to the White House to speak.
I'm going to need to know. If that's a truth, I'm going to need to know some more information.
I think that's the lie. I think the White House is the lie.
All right, let's go with it. Are we right?
You're wrong. That's a truth, actually. No, the lie is the Highland Games. I've never been anything sporty at all. Never played in the Highland Games.
Okay, well, we're gonna.
Oh my gosh, I'm
we're
so
gonna
horrible
need
at this. We
the
need to stop.
story. So, what you were invited to the White House to speak? How did that happen?
It sounds a lot more glamorous than it was. So I work in my day job in healthcare, and there was something we'd done in Scotland where we'd been a world-leading approach to a particular disease, and there was a world day about this disease and a sort of conference at the White House. But what I learned when I got there is I was imagining I would be in the White House building itself, but the White House is actually a complex. You know, it's like a city block with all these different buildings. So I was in the White House complex rather than the White House itself. But it still sounds nice and glamorous, and I got to speak and everything. So that was nice.
Glamorous. And then the swimming between tectonic plates. How does that work?
It's in Iceland. So in Iceland, that's where the 2 tectonic plates meet, and you can go and do, you get dressed up and you snorkel, but it's essentially through a chasm. You don't go down very deep, but it's where the 2 tectonic plates meet, and it's it's beautiful clear water, and it's these chasmy walls. It's brilliant, great experience.
We need to go to Iceland.
That sounds incredible, but I am slightly afraid of snorkeling. I'm not going to lie, because breathing in general is kind of difficult for me sometimes. I forget, and then I'm like, that's really cool. I'm really excited to talk to you now. You're a cool guy. You've got some really random stuff.
You passed our test. You're very cool. Not only did you write a very cool book, let's start there.
Yeah.
We would love for our listener, obviously this whole episode will be spoiler free because of course we want to encourage people who haven't read the book yet to pick it up. So could you tell us in your own words, what is the Book of Doors about and who is it for?
Okay, I suppose it's about a woman called Cassie Andrews who, at the start of the book, she's living a quiet life in New York City. She works as a bookseller. And then one winter's snowy evening, she comes into possession of a strange, unusual book that she soon discovers can do magical things. If she holds it in her own hand, she can turn any door into any other door just by thinking about it. So it's essentially a portal fantasy. She can open a door and go wherever she wants to be. So the book then follows Cassie and her best friend and flatmate, or I don't know what you call flatmate in the US, I don't think that's the right term, but on adventures as they try and work out what the book does, going all these places that they've never been and they wanted to go. But unbeknownst to them, they've fallen into this sort of dangerous secret world because there's lots of other people out there who know about books, and there are other magic books as well, and people who hunt them, and people would love to get their hands on the Book of Doors because of it's very powerful. So It's a thriller sort of book, adventure. Cassie and Izzy are running from new enemies, and they make friends, and there's sort of found family thing at the end, and that's it. It's an adventure story, a thriller.
Yes.
It is jam-packed with adventure. I did not know what I was picking up. It was like, I think in my brain, I was thinking this will be like a cozy fantasy.
Yes, because
that's
of what you said at the beginning. That's how it was.
It starts
That's
quite
all our
cozy,
friends
yeah.
said. It's like, oh, no, I'm 5 chapters in. She's this bookseller in New York. It's snowy. She like works in the cafe at the bookstore. We're thinking like cozy,
Yeah.
urban fantasy. Little did we know, it is sinister.
Yeah, it goes dark. I noticed actually the book you held up, I think you've got the US edition. Sorry, is that right?
I did. I'm very particular about covers, and I was so lucky because I got a signed copy. We were going to ask you about the cover really quick since you brought it up. So we are massive fans of the UK cover, and I feel like it does tonally, it fits the vibe of the book better, I think, than the US cover does.
You think so?
Yes.
So I have got the US one here in case anybody needs a comparison.
Yeah.
So the US I think the US, I mean, I like them both. I mean, I'm just lucky to have any book, never mind different covers. I think the US, in terms of marketing, I think they were pushing more towards the thriller side of things. It's got a more thriller feel, that cover.
Yeah.
The UK is definitely more, and it goes to what you're saying about cozy. It's got that sort of cozy feel, it's lots of swirly, goldy stuff and books, but they both sort of speak to different. So it's definitely a thriller, but there's definitely cozy elements, and although there's a lot of darkness in it, there's definitely darkness within a cozy world. So they both work, and I like them both, and I'm incredibly lucky to have books published anywhere, never mind in 2 different territories with 2 different covers.
And internationally best-selling, so clearly both the covers are doing their job.
Yeah. When you were writing this book and you were picking a genre, like, did you know that you were going to like literally have the mashup of all times where you put like romance and cozy and fantasy, thriller, absolutely sinister, mystery? Did you know you were going to do that going into it?
No, I don't think so. I think when I started writing the book, so I don't plan my books, I just make them up as I go. And when I started writing this, I only had the very first scene where Cassie gets I had the idea of the Book of Doors, the device, and the very first scene where Cassie ends up with the book. And initially, actually, I thought she would be working in a diner rather than a bookshop. So it was a slightly different scene. But then I thought, why wouldn't it be a bookshop? It's a book about books. So I only had that scene, and there's one scene towards the end of the book that I knew I wanted to do, which I won't say because it's spoiler. But everything else I just made up as I went. And I think it probably speaks to all the different things I read. So I read thrillers, and I read cozy books, and I read mysteries. I read a bit of fantasy, although not a lot, and I definitely used to read quite a lot of horror. Sort of Stephen King was my gateway drug into readings. All of that is a bit of a mix of the stuff I read and enjoy reading, so it's just me, I suppose. It's just the stories I like coming back out of me in a different way.
Yeah, we were going to ask you about that, so you've totally answered our question. Yeah, we were just like, you must be inspired by a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because you did blend them so well, and I'm shocked. I'm shocked that you're more of a like discovery writer, because I felt like your plot was so tight. It was blowing my mind. It was like a science fiction plot, and how well you, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but the way you loop things and the way things come full circle again and again and again, it's like a dopamine hit every time. It's so satisfying. So I was like, I really thought you must have really plotted the whole thing out ahead of time.
You're not the first person to say that. I've been at a few book clubs and other events and people have said that. But I think there's probably a couple of reasons why I could do it. One is, so some of it you do because you go through it more than once, obviously, and second or third time you go through it, you know what's going to happen, so you can plant little seeds. But I also love that kind of thing in books or films where there's maybe different meanings, and you see something or you read something, and then 10 pages later or half an hour later, there's a different perspective revealed, or a different, whether it's time travel or different points of view, and you see that something had a different meaning that you didn't understand at the time, and you almost want to go back and see it again and read again. And I think like you say, it's a dopamine hit. It's like, oh, you're revealing a bit of a puzzle you didn't even know was a puzzle. I think I wanted to do that, so I knew, this is a bit spoilery, but I'll say it because it's all over the internet, there is a bit of time travel in the book, so when there's time travel involved, you can go back and see things from a different perspective and understand them in a different way. So I think I was consciously trying to build that as I was going along, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. But then when I was going through the edit, obviously I can fine tune it and lay little seeds early on that reveal things later on, and it works quite well. I think it does work quite well. But no, I just made it up as I went.
It worked so well, and I think we were both very shocked at how much we were given, because we do read primarily fantasy, very different fantasy, but we both are huge fantasy readers. And so I think we're used to a story taking multiple volumes to kind of flesh out origin story and characters and then give us a plot. So the fact that not only do we get the origin in your single book, but we get like multiple characters fleshed out, we get a full plot, we get, again, because you've already given it away a little bit, because there's that time travel element, you get a lot of time with your characters and you get to watch them develop and you get to watch them grow in a way that we don't often get in such a short volume. So I think, I mean, every page counts. You just made every page worth it. And we got so much in such a short amount of time. Relative to us, it's a short amount of time. We were just like, this is everything. Like, I think we would have read a 5-book series with these characters and this plot, but like, you really gave it to us. That was so impressive.
Yeah, I think, I think I knew it was going to be a standalone, and also as my debut. So there was also a bit of, I want to make a mark. I want it to work. I want it to be a whole story. Obviously, fantasy series are big sellers. I think there's a bit of a move away from series now in publishing, because there's that thing where people might not buy it until they know it's going to be finished. And so that dent sales. And there's a phenomenon I know in series that there's like always a 70% or 30% drop off from the first to the second. So I think publishing is moving more towards standalones. And I didn't have any conversations like that with publishers, but I wanted a cohesive whole story. It does leave itself open to other, sequels or whatever, but it starts and finishes. And yes, there's a lot in it. And what you said, I think, really counts, the making every page count. I try to write with efficiency. I try to get a lot in. I think that's because I have a short attention span and I get bored very easy. So partly writing it's more fun. Oh, something exciting's going to happen, something's going to happen. And sometimes I'm a bit of a masochist. Sometimes I'll get to the end of a chapter and I'll just say to myself, what would be exciting to me if it happened now? And I'll just write that. And then the next day I think, oh God, I've got to work it out to make that work. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But that's what not planning lets you do. It lets you sort of be creative on the spot and almost, create a rod from one back sometimes. But writing with efficiency, that's the sort of thriller thing, trying to get people through a plot so they want to keep knowing what's going to happen. And sometimes you then have to put in lots of, it's not as simple as I'll just have a cliffhanger at the end of a plot, but it's that sort of idea. You have something that they want. It's like a tension. There's a tension they want to resolve. They want to know what happens, whether that's chapter to chapter or over a part of a story or over the whole novel. You're giving them things that there's mysteries they want to be solved, and you solve some of them as you go along and more a bit later, and then the whole mystery is solved at the end. So writing with efficiency, I think, allows people to digest it easily and quickly.
You do it amazing. I think you'd be like an incredible TV episode writer because you're very, I don't want to call them cliffhangers, but you're really good at that end of chapter tease.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you want people to keep engaged, Yeah,
I feel like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because sometimes I get reading fatigue. I think a lot of heavy readers get this. Sometimes books just seem like they feel like something else. And that can be a good thing, like a nostalgia feeling. Or it can feel boring, like I've already read this book.
Yeah.
And for anybody listening, this book did not feel like any other book I've read, which is like nothing is better than that refresh. That like, oh, my obsession with reading is reignited. What has inspired you? I know you mentioned you actually read a lot of horror.
Yeah.
What would you say is like God tier books for you that have like inspired you as a writer?
Nobody's quite phrased that question in that way before. That's quite a nice way to phrase the question. What's a God tier book? So I've read across all different genres. I've read most things, or tried to read most things. I haven't read many westerns or romance, not because I object to them in principle, just I haven't been drawn to them. Things I think are fantastic. So some of the very early Stephen King books, some of the sort of the slimmer ones like Pet Sematary or Dead Zone are very, very good. I mean, he's just a fabulous writer, but I sometimes find his bigger ones were too long for me and there was too much in it. So the sort of short, punchy ones were very, very good. I like, there's a science fiction book by a guy called Dan Simmons called Hyperion, which was part of a series, but the first one of those, I don't know if you read, it's just blew my mind when I read it. There's a do you know Robert R. McCammon? He's a writer from the South in the US. He sort of was around the same time as Stephen King in the sort of 80s and 90s. He wrote a book called Boy's Life, which was it's sort of a nostalgia sort of thing about his childhood in Alabama, and they find a dead body and it's all about the mystery of solving that. But that's sort of looking back to the time of innocence, becoming an adult, that sort of end of the childhood. That stuff works for me. And then thriller books, something like Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. which is just one of those archetype FBI hunting the serial killer, very sort of want to know what happens sort of book. Anything that you get annoyed if you can't keep reading it and you've got to go and do something else. Anything that it'll keep you up past your bedtime reading it. Those to me are God-tier books, regardless of the genre. Crime does that quite a lot, the sort of the thrillery crime sort of thing. But anything that you don't want to put down for me is a God-tier book, because either in their skill or in the story, the author is speaking to you somewhere and they're taking you somewhere that you want to go and you don't want to stop going to that place.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
You can see it. Like, you can see that influence in the Book of Dwarves. And that's so interesting because we're heavy fantasy readers.
Yeah.
I think that I don't want to say we're starved for that feeling.
Oh, I'm starved for it. This is why I have to still read Blake Crouch in between our long series.
Because I think in fantasy, it's a lot about the singing for your supper.
Yeah.
And like putting in a lot of time for that payoff.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. It's a different transaction,
Yeah.
but boy, when we do get to pick up a book that just like can't put down at all, that's really fun. It feels fresh, like you said. So when you were looking for inspiration for your characters and such, did they just come to you, or did you have to kind of go looking for who is Drummond, who's Cassie, who's Mr. Weber, or like did you feel like you just already knew them?
It was a bit of a mixture. So Cassie was there from the get-go. She was like, I kind of knew who she was. She was an introverted sort of book person. Best friend Izzy was there from the get-go as well, and I wanted them to have, although they're very good friends, to have the sort of contrasting characters, because that gives you a bit of the tension. So they were both there waiting for the bus when it arrived, the plot bus. Drummond Fox was there, obviously not based on me at all, a dashing, handsome Scotsman with a library. He was there from the get-go, but I actually, for a long time writing the book, I didn't know what his motivation was. I knew I needed him, because I needed him to be telling Cassie and Izzy, here's the world that you're stepping in, and telling the audience, really, here's the world you're stepping into. But I had a whole different plot for him originally, why it was that he was, out and on the run. And I was about 3/4 of the way through the book before I realised actually what his true motivation was. So that's one of the sort of, when you're pantsing a book, sometimes you don't really know what a character's doing and you have to work it out. But I knew his character was. But then other characters like Azaki and Lund, who are book hunters, they sort of appeared just in the book as I was writing. And Lund, I sort of discovered as I was going along. I mean, for some reason, he's sort of a Norwegian heritage, but from Canada. And I don't know why that's the case. It's just who he is. And, he's just this big guy who doesn't say very much. And I don't even know why he does some of the things he does. He's just, that's just who he is. He was just sort of leading himself. So that's the joy of pantsing as well. Sometimes people just arrive and say, look at me, I'm going to be in your story, whether you like it or not. And you can just run with it and see what happens. And him and Azaki both became, as you get to the end of the book, integral to sort of the caper that happens at the end where they're trying to defeat the bad guys. So yeah, that's a joy for me. You start off with some of the details. You've got enough of a sort of a jumping off point, and then I just start writing, and other people appear, and they come and go, or sometimes they come and stay. And Lund and Azaki are sort of characters I really like now. So that's the joy of writing.
Oh my gosh.
And I love Drummond so much. I would say he's my favorite character.
No, he's great.
And I feel like, as the reader, we discover his motivation later, but he always feels like a very urgent and intense and motivated character. Like, you can tell he's very earnest from the get-go. So it's like, he has a motivation, but that almost keeps you reading, because we don't know. Like, we really don't know what his motivation is. That's part of the mystery. So that's really exciting. Yeah. And then I think Izzy did feel like a very realized character from the get, but I think it was because she was juxtaposed with Cassie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when I don't want to spoil anything.
I know, I'm like, just be careful, because it's like so much of this book was full of gasps for me. Like, when you're reading and you're like, oh shit, I did not see that going there.
Good.
But
I'm pleased.
that is so fun.
Yeah, no, I'm pleased. Yeah, no, Izzy is sort of defined by her contrast to Cassie, and I think, from some of the reviews or feedback I've seen, she's a sort of a love-hate character. You either love her or you hate her. But even people who enjoy the book, kind of get annoyed by her because of her function in the plot is almost to be the spoiler. Cassie's wanting to run away into this exciting world, and Izzy's trying to stop her and trying to be the voice of reason, and that can be annoying if you also want to run away into that exciting world. So, but yeah, she's defined in opposition to Cassie, and she serves a function in the plot, which is about being a different perspective and a different voice. But I liked her. She's kind of, maybe it's my sense of humour, maybe it's too British a sense of humour, but I found her quite funny and quite sort of vivacious, and she's the sort of person you would like to have a friend. I think, like, very loyal, her own person, and so yeah, so I like her. I like her both. I like them both.
Yeah, I can't remember what your impression of Izzy was, but I think that I was probably in the camp that she like needled me, but in a good way. I think so many of the other characters are so serious, and so in that Izzy brings. She's a very necessary.
She's a bit like relief as well. Yeah.
Relief, of just someone who's kind of like not obsessed with what we're doing and is just like, what are we doing? Like, this is weird. What are we like? No. And so she's very necessary, but she does needle you as the reader. You're like, get out of here. We're ready to go on the mission.
Yeah.
So I did fall in that camp. What did you think of Izzy?
I think it's very similarly, like, she would kind of get on my nerves, but get on my nerves like how you do. Like, everybody has like their friend, their closest person in their life who's also like a low-key conscience. And you're like, stop slowing my roll. And you're like, hold on.
You're definitely more of a Cassie probably, and I'm more of an Izzy.
Yes.
Actually.
I just wonder, like, did you have any idea? Because your book's been like a wild success.
Mm-hmm.
Did you expect that? Did it surprise you? Or are you like, of course, like, I've put in my time. I knew my book was gold.
It's hard to know, because the success of a book is not always down to the quality of the book. There's so many other things that play into it. I think I was proud of the book when it was finished, and that's not always been the case. I've been trying to write books for years, and sometimes you finish them and that's not very good. On to the next one, and then sometimes you finish them. I was signed with an agent 2 books before I wrote this one, and I loved the book that I was signed with an agent for, and my agent loved it, obviously, but it didn't sell for a variety of reasons. But I was proud of that book, and then I wrote something else, and then I wrote this. And I was proud of this book as well. But I think once it's sold, and it sold very quickly, unusually quickly, so my agent actually put it out to publishers, and this is in the UK, on a Thursday before he was going on holiday for a week. He was going to Italy for a friend's wedding or something, and he said, I'll phone you when I get back and we'll see how things are going, because it's usually months before you hear in the publishing industry, at least in the UK. And his whole holiday was spoiled by publishers phoning him up, trying to arrange phone calls, and we sold the UK rights like the following week, and I think we sold the US within about 10 days as well. So I think at that point I knew, regardless of what I thought of the book, I knew that the publishing industry was responding to it. And I think if the publishing industry wants something to sell, not to be too cynical about the industry, but if they want something to sell, it will sell, because they'll push it. And people need to know about the book, otherwise they won't know to buy it. So in pure financial sense, the amount of money that they've put into the book, either buying it off me or marketing it, they have to make it sell. So that to me is nice. That's nice to know they're putting a lot of push to make it sell. But it's easier for me because I think it's a book I'm proud of. So I can stand up quite happily and say, well, I'm pleased that this is selling because I like it. And I would read it. If I hadn't written it, I would probably read it and enjoy it as well. So it makes my life easier trying to be the face of something that I think I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to me. So it sounds to me like, from your perspective, it's like once it sells, depending on how that goes and what your deal is, that kind of gives you indication even before it hits bookshelves of how.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Whether you got a winner on your hands.
I think that's right. I think there's been quite a bit of research into this, and I think the best predictor of the success of a book is the marketing budget from the publisher. That's the best thing that tells a book. So TikToks and all these other, there's a sort of phenomenon about TikToks, and that will push certain books, but you can't control that as a publisher. That's sort of organic. The thing you control is the marketing budget and how much you tell people about the book, or whether you have a relationship with a bookseller, so the book's on the front table at the front of the shop rather than the fantasy section 2 stores up or whatever, two stories up. That's what sells a book. And I know lots of authors in the UK who write brilliant books, and they'll sell a book and they'll get quite a modest advance, and this is the bare minimum of marketing. There might be a press release, just because the publishing industry doesn't have enough. They don't have enough people to push every book the way that they should. So there's a sort of select few books that get a real push. Really big name books, your Stephen Kings or whatever, they'll get a big push, and other books they just get printed and put on a shelf somewhere and people never hear about them, which is a shame. So it's just the publishing, it's just capitalism basically. It's the publishing industry. But all the signs, certainly in the UK and in the US, there was a really nice push behind it to get people to be aware of it, and it seems to have worked. So it's done really well. I've got no complaints.
And do you have any say, given that your publisher now represents you, do you have any say in marketing? Like, were you able to reach out to any influencers or work with any kind of grassroots, anything that you wanted to do on your end, or were you kind of hands off once your agent had sold it?
So I'm really old and stupid about social media stuff, so I wouldn't know what to say anyway. They were both in the US and the UK, although I'm closer to the UK people, they would ask me questions. They would say, "Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Or can you help us do this?" So often they would be doing things like they would do little. There'd be book festivals or conferences, and they'd ask me to write a little introductory thing, um, or I'd do video, I'd shoot videos for them, or so I would always be willing, and I would always give my opinion if asked, but I have no expertise in that area to offer an opinion. But even things like the book covers, like in both the US and the UK, I was asked my opinion on the book cover, and that's marketing. I'm asked if I want to do radio or TV interviews, all that kind of stuff, and I'll do anything they want me to do. But yeah, I just let them. They're the experts. They're professional marketers or publicity people. I'll just do whatever they tell me to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It blows my mind that I believe you said you have like a full-time job on top of writing this incredible book, and it sounds like other books as well.
Yeah, I have a full-time job. I work in the health service in Scotland. I've got a role as sort of director of screening, so like cancer screening programs. I'm not clinical, but I'm not medical, but I sort of manage the screening programs in Scotland. So yeah, that's a full-time job. The Book of Doors was written during COVID though, so I wasn't doing anything else. I was working and we would go out and walk the dogs, but in the evenings I would have some time. So I wrote the Book of Doors pretty much during COVID. And yeah, so I work during the day and then I'll find an hour in the evening or a couple of hours at the weekends. And I can type very fast, which helps. So as long as I can do 3,000 words a day, or 1,000 to 3,000 words a day, most books are about 100,000. Well, not fantasy books, but most of these sorts of books are 100,000 words. So if you're doing 1,000 words a day or 3,000 words a day, that's, if you know what you're writing, it helps obviously. But if you can do that sort of pace, that's about 3 or 4 months worth of writing. So it's doable if you're consistent and you keep doing it. It's the consistency that matters.
Wow, I am so impressed right now.
Too.
I'm like, God, what am I doing with my hidden hours?
Seriously.
I watch a lot of TV. Don't get me wrong. I'm very lazy. I would quite easily watch TV and scroll Instagram rather than writing if I possibly can.
What do you like to watch?
We watch everything. We watch. We've just finished watching the 4th season of True Detective, the Jodie Foster one, which was good. I've heard mixed things about it, but I enjoyed it. And we actually watched the 3rd season before that because I hadn't seen any of the True Detective since the 1st season first came out. So we watched 3 and 4. So we just go whatever's on Netflix or Apple or domestic TV. We just scroll and find something that we both can agree we can tolerate, because we've got slightly different tastes. So if we can both watch it, we'll watch that. And in fact, we have to work out now. We were just talking before this what we're going to watch tonight because we finished True Detective. We have to work out what the next thing is. So we'll just browse and see what the next thing is. I'll watch anything. And I even watched Bridgerton. I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy Bridgerton. My wife, I kind of started not watching it on principle. I'm not watching this, but it was on, and I kind of got sucked into it. A bit like Downton Abbey. When Downton Abbey was on, I was like, I don't like period dramas. Not interested. And I just kind of got sucked into it. It's like crack cocaine. It's like I need to know what's going to happen. I need to know what's going to happen. So I was a bit like that with Bridgerton as well. So yeah, I'll watch anything.
It hooks you.
It does hook
you.
It's so nice to look at all the pretty costumes, and I would never admit this to my wife though. I maintain the illusion I watched it under protest, but I enjoyed it really.
Yeah, we do watch Bridgerton as much as we've become very heavy readers in the last couple of years. So we watch a lot less, but there are those shows that sneak in, and it's just like no book will get us to stop watching it. We just got to get through this.
I think that we both really loved the Silo.
Yeah, that was good as well. Have you read the book? Have you read Wool? That's based on.
Yeah, I read the full trilogy this summer because Kristen was watching the show. And you read Wool, right?
I read the first one, but I'm going to wait till the next season comes out before I read the next book because sometimes I have a hard time remembering if there's too much time between them. But I do really think for us, the sweet spot is when we can read a book and there is a good adaptation, whether it's movie or show. And we want this for all of our books.
Yeah,
I don't know how we make it happen.
How do we get the Book of Doors as a 6-episode screen adaptation? Because it would be so, the way you wrote it, it's so episodic. There would be so many, we have to watch the next episode.
So the TV rights have been sold in the US. But that doesn't actually mean anything. So there's a production company that's working on it at the moment, and they have a showrunner, and they've written a pitch. And I think last week or the week before they were pitching to streamers. But even that doesn't mean anything. It's so hard getting things made. I know people who are in the industry who are saying at the moment the mantra is just survive till 25 because there's no money in the industry. Nothing's getting commissioned. It's definitely been optioned, and we'll just have to wait and see if it gets. I'd love it to be made as well. I mean, even if it's totally different, and because sometimes I have to change things for legitimate reasons, even if it's a different interpretation of the same thing, I would take the money and watch it quite happily. See what happens.
Yeah.
You deserve it. You deserve it. We'd love you to be able to leave your full-time job if you'd like, so that you could write us more books.
Yeah, I would like that as well. Yeah, so the second book is out. My second book is out in July next year, which I wrote. What year are we in now? I wrote over last year and early this year, and that was a much harder book to write. So I wrote Book of Doors in about 4 months. It just kind of flew. And the second book, which is in many ways a much more straightforward story, it took me like the best part of a year. It was a real struggle. And I think that was partly just because I had this contractual thing where I had to do a second book and I just wanted to get it done. But partly because I was editing Book of Doors at the same time and working full time. So I think I was just too full. There was just too much going on. So yeah, I'm lucky enough that the Book of Doors will pay off our mortgage probably in the next few months with the payments for Book of Doors. So there's a serious thing about, do I want to give up work or reduce my hours and write more full time than I am at the moment? So that will probably be decided between now and Christmas, I guess. But yeah, I would love to. I don't think I would like to be just a full time writer. I think I might go a bit spare if I was just sitting in my room writing. I think going out to work gives you a bit of variety and you can meet different people, and I'm not in my head all the time. But yeah, it would be nice to be able to have more time to write than I do at the moment, definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know how some like Hobbit authors do this, where they just stay in their little Hobbit hole and like write 7 days a week, months at a time. I have no idea how they do that.
Oh, I think I could do it.
I know, because you're a Hobbit, but I could not.
I'm like, just me in a room? Oh no, what will I do? Yes.
It's great when it's working, when it's like, oh, I'm writing and this is fun, and yeah, I've done my 3 things. But when it's really hard and you're sitting here for 6 hours trying to think, that's when it's hard. And I think just doing other things and being away, it gives you the sort of the brain space to come up with ideas. So yeah, I'd like to write more than I do. Ideally I'd like to do that sort of 1 book a year sort of thing. I think that's the sort of the sweet spot, because you keep momentum and you keep people interested. But that's quite hard paced, doing 1 a year. But maybe if you can build up a sort of a backlog of ones that aren't quite good enough and you can come back to them and work on them. And I'm sure authors do that all the time. These really established authors who are trying to do 1 a year, sometimes they have to pull something out of the bottom drawer because there's nothing fresh. So I'll just tart this up and make it work better. But yeah, 1 book a year would be the dream if I could do that. But we'll have to see.
I would love to know both, so you can decide which you want to talk about first, but I would love to know what you're allowed to tell us about the book that's coming out next year. And then I would also love to know, like what kind of ideas you have floating around for other books, or just how you come up with ideas and what you do with them when you're not ready to work on them right away.
Yeah, so on your second question first, I mean, ideas, I always say ideas are the easy thing. It's easy to have an idea. I mean, ideas come all the time. I've started a few years ago just taking a note on iPad and my iPhone notes of just ideas. So I've got like a list of 20 things that's just, sometimes it's just a scene or it's just a concept or it's like a jumping off point that if I have something to write, I'll take that and I'll see what I can do with it. And some things are not ready to be written. Some things arrive almost fully formed and you just want to get them out. So ideas are not the problem. And I mean, I'd like to write. Most of my ideas at the moment are sort of Book of Doors adjacent because there's an interest in Book of Doors. So I had a 2-book contract in the US and the UK, and we're probably going to need to go into a discussion about, do I get another contract? And I'll probably need to have pitches for that. So I've started to think about what would I want to pitch as a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th or whatever it would be book. And I've sort of disciplined myself to be thinking in the sort of Book of Doors space. But it would be nice to. I don't think I'd ever write horror again. I used to try and write horror, but I don't think there's much of a market for horror now. But sort of thriller, a mainstream thriller, I would do. Maybe not a crime sort of police procedural, but some sort of, like a Harlan Coben sort of normal people in the real world, but sort of twist and turny sort of stuff. Something like that would be nice. I don't think I would ever write fantasy. I don't think I read enough pure fantasy. I've read a lot over the last few years because my agent represents a lot of fantasy writers. But I don't think I read enough to be credible in that space. I would end up regurgitating Lord of the Rings or something because that's all I know, which is not what people want these days. I would write sci-fi, but probably grounded sci-fi. So a bit like the Book of Doors is fantasy in a real world. The book I got signed with my agent for that didn't sell was a time travel book, but it was all about time travel in our real world. What would it be like if time travel actually existed? So that was kind of grounded sci-fi, and that didn't sell because it was too sci-fi for mainstream publishers, but not sci-fi enough for sci-fi publishers. So I'd like to be in that sort of space where it's accessible to people, because there's lots of people who won't read fantasy or sci-fi, but they will read a book that has touches of sci-fi or fantasy in it if it's in the real world, that sort of groundedness. And then book 2, what can I tell you about book 2? It's probably going to go on Amazon and stuff in the next couple of weeks, so you don't have long to wait. But it's in the same sort of wheelhouse as Book of Doors, so it's set in the real world, and it's about magic in the real world in the same sort of way that Book of Doors is. It's more London set than New York set this time, so it's about a group of people in London. But there's, in the same way that Book of Doors is, because I love travel, there's other destinations in it. There's scenes in Hong Kong and Cairo and scenes in the US. So again, it's the same sort of thing, magic and people traveling about it for any excuse, and twists and turns and thrillery sort of stuff. So I think that's July. That comes out next year.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
Oh,
Can
that sounds
we
so good.
get on whatever list you have that gets
Yeah.
like an early copy? I would
Absolutely.
love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will mark you
That
down.
would be
I don't
so
know if I
fun.
have control over this, but I will suggest you absolutely for early
Oh,
copies.
thank you. Yeah, what you said is so true. I think we are fantasy sci-fi readers, and I think whenever we want just something fresh or something to, get us out of a big long series, it's like I can't just go pick up a lit fic very easily.
Yeah,
I've
no.
tried. It's a little hard for me.
Yeah.
But it's like I can read something, I would call it like urban fantasy. Like
Yes.
it takes place in our world, but but it's got something. It's just got that little
Yeah.
sprinkle of supernatural or something different to pique that part of my brain that just loves that stuff. So, gosh, I really want to read the time travel novel that
I know,
didn't
me
sell.
too. Like, is it available? Can we read it?
It's not available. I mean, it's very good. I think it's very good. It's
You should just indie publish it.
well, but the thing is, I've thought about that. But my agent still thinks it's good enough to be published. It's just maybe I need enough sort of commercial exposure and people buying other books. But it is quite different. I mean, I can see why it didn't sell. It's not terribly commercial because it's almost like 6 different stories with a sort of a thread of interspersed stories. So it's a bit like Hyperion. I don't know if you read Hyperion, but there's 4 or 5 different stories in Hyperion, and there's in between each one there's a sort of a thread that connects them. So it's a bit like that, but it just plays about with what if time travel was real in a real world. So, how could you use time travel in the justice system if you were prosecuting cases? Could you go back in time and see what actually happened and get evidence? Or would you use time travel for tourism purposes, go into periods in history as a sort of a tourist rather than... And it just plays with these different ideas, and it moves increasingly forward in time into the far future. So it's got touches of sci-fi and touches of real world, but it's that sort of 6 stories. I could see that putting people off because it's not like one continuous story, but no, I like it. I would think about if I'm not going to get it published, I would think about indie publishing it at some point, probably.
I mean, I think that your agent probably is onto something, especially now that you're an international bestseller and you've got another book coming in 2025. Right. I mean, it's like, maybe as your 3rd or 4th book, your name's going to be enough to sell it, to the people who are a little more skeptical. Yeah,
that would be nice. It would be very different, but I mean, there are authors out there who do very different things and they still sell. So yeah, it'd be nice to get it out there. I've not given up on it yet, certainly.
Yeah, it sounds so good. Like I also just love time travel speculative
I love time
fiction.
travel.
So.
I love time travel. There's not enough time travel fiction out there, I don't think.
Yeah, well, and I think that some of the speculative fiction, we both love speculative fiction, but I think some of it is so sci-fi heavy that it's like the layperson isn't going to pick it up,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of disagree with the publishers, I guess. I kind of think there is a need for it.
Yeah, get us in there. We'll tell you what the readers are reading.
For you.
We'll
do it ourselves. We want to know about your pinch me moments. Like, since becoming a successful author, what are some pinch me moments that have come from the Book of Doors?
So I think getting the Lee Child endorsement was probably a pinch me moment. My publisher in the UK, I've got different publishers in the UK and the US, but my publisher in the UK publishes Lee Child, and he was over for because he lives in the US now, he was over for some event, and they said, we'll just give him a copy of the ARC. And I was like, fine, not expecting, because lots of authors get asked to blurb things. And he read it, no doubt, in one of his mansions wherever he lives. And he sent an email saying, it was great, and here's a quote. So getting that sort of a calibre of an author, that was a real pinch me moment. I mean, I got lots of great authors really lucky to get lots of authors who read it and blurbed it. So that was nice. But the Lee Child one is a sort of, you stick that on the front. So that was definitely a pinch me moment. I think the publication week, when I went down to London, and there was a couple of special editions produced in the UK there's a bookshop called Goldsborough Books that do special editions, because they have crates. They do a science fiction and fantasy club, and they do a different club, and they produced 2 different special editions, and I had to go and sign all of those. There was like 3,000 or something I had to sign. So sitting in a room with these massive stacks of hardback books and being passed them to sign, that was a sort of pinch me moment. And then even getting to do things like this, getting to go and speak at festivals or speak to people who've read the book. I mean, I don't look at Goodreads very often, but there's something like 30,000 people on Goodreads have rated it. To think that there's at least 30,000 people out there who've read the thing you've written, it's just kind of mind blowing. So I don't think about it very often, but if you stop and think about it, or tell you what a real pinch me moment was, I was walking around. I live near Edinburgh in Scotland, and I was walking around Edinburgh a couple of weeks ago, and in the window of one of the bookshops, they had the Book of Doors next to whatever the Stephen King book was that was out on that day. And having those, given that Stephen King was sort of the first thing I read, having those 2 books next to each other on the windows, that was a kind of a little moment. And also we were in Singapore earlier this year, and in the airport in Singapore, in the bookshop, they had Book of Doors at number 4. I don't think it was the number 4 seller. I think they just put it on the space. But next to me was Stephen King, and then Jeffrey Archer was below it. So these big sort of literary names, things like that, which you just see and they take you out of yourself for a moment. So there's my book on it. Those are the pinch me moments, I think, and they're lovely. They're very lovely.
Oh my gosh, that would be so mind-blowing. I could totally see it. I hope you took a picture.
Oh yeah, my Instagram is all just pictures of me pointing at my books and bookshop windows.
Yeah, you should be so proud. You put a lot of work into it, and it's beautiful when our hard work pays off, right? Like you have the vision and you do the work, but it paid off, and it's such an exciting thing to watch.
Yeah, and it's because I started writing novels when I was a teenager, or trying to write novels when I was a teenager, and I'm much older than that now. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm very old now. So it's like 30 years of work, 25 years of work. And I was convinced I was going to be published by the time I was 25. I was like, I'll never have to have a job. I'll write my novel, I'll send it off, and I'll be rich and famous. And of course, that never happened. I was writing consistently over that time. And I've seen quite a few people say it's amazing that, people who've liked it have said it's amazing that this is a debut author. And yes, it's the first book published, but it's like the 25th book or something I've written. So I've been putting in the miles over the years to try and get to that level. And I never wrote anything as good before that. So it's come at the right time, I think. I think it's the right book to have been my first book, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes so much sense. We were very shocked. We were like, this is a man with a different job who just decided to write something in COVID, and it's this. That kind of segues into, we were going to ask you if you had any sort of advice for either authors who are trying to get traditionally published, or just debut authors in general.
I think
what your advice would be.
So the things I would say to people is, writing and publishing are 2 different things. You can be a terribly successful writer and never be published. If you just want to write things for your own creative output and let your friends read them, you can do that. If you want to be published, though, you have to, I think about what publishing means. It's a slightly different skill set. You need to engage with, capitalist organisations who are trying to make money. You have to be comfortable with that you'll get feedback and you'll get criticism. You have to be comfortable that you'll get 1-star reviews on Goodreads and it's not going to destroy your life. You have to want to do things like this. It helps, I think, to be comfortable being able to speak about yourself and speak about books. So all that sort of stuff, you can learn that sort of skill. The other thing I would say is there's lots that you can't control in the publishing industry. You never know if the book that you're submitting is going to get to the right person at the right time, who's got a space on their list, who's just had a nice lunch and they're feeling good about the world and they want to read something. You might end up with somebody who's in a miserable mood and they've got a cold and they don't want to read anything and they just reject you out of hand. So all you can do is be as good as you can be as professional as you can be. So when you're writing to an agent or writing to a publisher, make sure your cover letter is professional. Don't give them an easy reason to say no to you. My agent tells me he gets thousands of submissions, and most of them you can dissuade, put out straight away for very simple reasons. So make it as hard as possible for people to say no to you. So write the best thing you can write and make sure it's finished. Don't submit before it's finished. Write the best professional cover letter, and persistence. So the longer you do it, you might be one of these fabulously talented young people who writes one book and gets a fabulous deal. Lots of those people don't last, though. They do 1 or 2 books and then they sort of disappear. But the longer you write, like me, the better you become. no matter how good you are, you'll be better in 20 years if you keep writing. And the more chance you have of people seeing something you write. So I tried writing all different things, thrillers and horrors, and I was always sending them off, and I would get nice feedback, and it wasn't quite the right sort of thing. It wasn't quite good enough. So if you keep going, don't give up is basically the answer. If you keep going, you'll get better, and hopefully somebody will see something that works for them, and then they'll champion it for you. So persistence. And I've got loads of advice. Don't keep rewriting the same thing over and over again. Some authors I see, this is my book, I'm going to rewrite this. It's not quite right, I'll rewrite it. Get some feedback, I'll rewrite it. If you get published, you can't do that. You have to write more than one book. So write the next thing, send it off and write something different. Write something in a different genre. Write something in a genre you don't think you'll like just to try it. Just try different things.
I love all of that advice.
Yeah, I think you could actually translate that to almost any skill that you're trying to master or any dream passion you have.
Yeah, because there is the business side of there's like the hobby and the passion, and then there is like the business side of distributing it and making it palatable to people, and there is the professional side of your hobby if you want to make money at it. Yeah. So I think that's great advice, and I find it very inspiring that you had this dream from the time that you were young and you kind of never gave up on it, but you also weren't massively successful at it for 20 years.
Yeah. So I wrote awful things. I wrote awful books for 15 years. And I just never gave up. And I always felt things were getting better. Like I never just hit a wall where I first met an agent probably about 10 years ago, and that didn't lead to anything, but even getting a meeting with an agent felt like, well, that's better than I was doing previously. So, and there were times when I didn't write anything for a year or so, and I didn't know what to write, but I was always annoyed with myself if I didn't write. So there was almost like a drive. I have to keep writing. And I always thought probably I would get published in some way at some point. I never dreamed of anything like this, but I think if I hadn't done it, if I'd just given up on it, I would have always been disappointed in myself because I thought I could do it to a level, and it's just laziness that would get in the way if I hadn't done it. And laziness is not a good excuse for not doing things.
Did you do any studying for writing, like at university or anything, or did you ever take any writing courses?
I did a literature degree at university because I thought that's what you had to do to be a writer, and I didn't really enjoy it. So all those kind of serious books like Moby Dick and stuff I hated. I enjoyed some of them, like The Count of Monte Cristo, for example, that's in the Book of Doors. But lots of those books, I was like, just not interested. So I did that. But I think the best training you can do to be a writer is there's two things you can do. One is you can write lots, and the second thing you do is read lots. And read things you wouldn't like to read normally, read outside your genre, read classics, read new books. And as you're reading, just be conscious of what the author is doing. So don't just read it for entertainment, absolutely, but read it and think about what is the author doing in these scenes, or how have they structured the book, and sort of learning by exposure. I've picked up all the stuff I know. I've not been in any training courses, and I've picked it all up just by reading lots. Read great authors and see what they do, and try and ask yourself, why are they great? Why are they so successful? Why are they doing what they're doing? And you will begin to pick up some of those tools and techniques and skills as well.
When you project into your future, what would be like the dream for you? It's pumping out a year a book, it sounds like.
A book a year.
So my wife has said that we need to buy a castle with enough garden for the dogs to run around in. So a castle with the dogs, and maybe some more dogs. But no, I think honestly, if I don't publish another book, I'd be happy, because I've achieved with the Book of Doors, or the Book of Doors has achieved more than I ever thought was necessarily guaranteed. So if I could write a book a year, and people want to read them, whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people, and people want to still pay me to write books, I can't ask for much more than that. I'm not very, I'm not very materialistic. I don't need to drive Ferraris or anything. If we can travel and see places we want to see, keep the dogs fed, because the dogs have very expensive tastes, and have enough money to keep a roof over our head, I don't need anything else. And if people want to read my books, that'd be great. I'd be happy with that.
You've mentioned travel several times, and I know that's even in your bio, like on Goodreads, that you love to travel. Does travel, do you think, inspire you to write, or vice versa? Do you write about traveling because you love it, or when you travel, does it inspire you to like put things into your books?
I think, it's sort of, it's both. And really, for me, reading a book is about escaping, going on an adventure and escaping and seeing something different. And travel does that as well. Travel's like reading a book in real life almost. You're going somewhere else, you're getting exposed to a different world. And like for me always, I love cities in particular, but the first sort of couple of hours when you're arriving in a new city, that sort of slightly culture shock feeling of it's all overwhelming, and you're going places, and there's new restaurants to eat and new food, and I love that. That's like opening a book for the first time, like a book you've never read, and going on adventures. And actually, where Book of Doors came from is I love traveling, and we were in COVID and I couldn't travel. I love traveling, but I hate being on planes and I hate airports. So having a Book of Doors to be able to just be there is great. And the first 30 pages or whatever it is, the first 40 pages of Book of Doors is just my holiday photos. Look at this place I've been, and me trying to go back there and travel vicariously. So yeah, it definitely informs the writing. The travel is an escape thing in the same way a book is. It's like I love travel where you go to lots of different places. So it's nice to go to a city for a week and do a city break. But if you can do like 3 or 4 weeks, and every 4 or 5 days you're going somewhere different, it's like starting a new book every third or fourth day. Or we're going somewhere else, we're going on a train ride and you're going through the countryside and seeing all this stuff. Or you get on a flight and you're flying over Arizona or whatever it is, and you're seeing the landscape and all that kind of stuff. It's the same to me as reading a book. It's an adventure.
That said so well. Now I understand when people ask me why I'm so obsessed with traveling. I'm just going to say, it's because listen to my interview with Gareth Brown. He's gonna explain it for you, because that's exactly how it is. I do think it's beautiful when a book actually transports you, and your book definitely transports you. It's a magical power that you have.
Thank you.
You did such a good job. I hope everybody picks it up.
You must have actually been to all the places, or you want to go there.
I've been the only place in the Book of Doors that I haven't been to South America yet. So there's a bit at the start with Lund and Izaki in South America. We're hoping to go to South America next year, but everywhere else is literally places I or my wife and I have been. Like all the places in Europe and Tokyo and the US and stuff. It's all places we've been, and I loved, and I couldn't travel. So if I can't travel, I'll write about it, and I'll try and capture the mood of what it was like to be in those places, or the atmosphere. And that yeah, you're right. Some people have said, some people have found it a bit slow, which I totally get, but other people have loved it. It's very vivid and they can visualize all that kind of stuff, which is great. It's lovely to hear people have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Oh, it totally helps. I think that segues perfectly into our last question, which is, what do you hope readers take away, or how do you hope they feel after they read the Book of Doors?
All I ever want to do is fundamentally just entertain people. So if you've been able to escape from your problems when you've been reading Book of Doors, if you've been able to get away from stuff, and if you've had a good time, I'm not trying to write Pulitzer Prize winning literature or anything. I'm not that deep. I just want to entertain people and make people think. And I suppose if there's a theme in Book of Doors, probably it's about kindness and the benefit of kindness. Kindness to your friends, kindness and loyalty, kindness to older people, and kindness to yourself, because Cassie's journey in the book is all about forgiving herself for something that happened. So it's entertaining, hopefully keeping you entertained, but also with a thought that kindness, particularly in this world, the way things are, kindness matters. And you can find kindness in the small things in everyday life, and that has value. I think that's probably the main message, if there is a message in Book of Doors.
I think one of the big themes I took away from it, in addition to that, was just that kind of you stick by your principles. I think that it would have been very easy for Drummond to kind of give up, but he doesn't, and at great personal peril.
Yeah.
And so I think he really sticks by his principles, and I think Cassie and Mr. Weber do as well.
Yeah.
I just think there's so many times where it would have been so easy for the characters to give up,
Yeah.
to just stop.
Yeah.
And they don't. And I think it's kind of just their personal conviction. They just they're like, well, we might not win, or it might be really uncomfortable. We're just going to stick it out.
It's the right thing to do. Yeah, it's the right thing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that might have been some of my favorite and most surprising non-action parts of the book is when Cassie is with Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I like that as well.
I don't spoil anything, but I really loved that
Yeah.
little vignette part of the story. It was really special to me.
Well, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Well, now I feel like I need to go to Scotland, meet a couple cute dogs.
Yeah.
It seems like
It's great here. Come to Scotland. It's great. We've got lots of libraries and hills and mountains and stuff. It's great.
My husband and I were in Edinburgh in June, and we also honeymooned in Edinburgh in 2015. So it's one of our special places.
It is a nice place, Edinburgh. Hard to get a house there these days, but it's a very nice place to visit. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you taking time
no
to
problem.
talk to us about doors, talk about writing. You're brilliant, and we're so glad that you're putting awesome work out into the world for us to be entertained and to feel things. I hope that everybody listening to this picks up the Book of Doors, because it is fast-paced, it is fun, it is going to be a wild ride that once you get off, you want to just get back in. So please make more books for us to jump back into.
And I think it's for all readers. It's definitely a genre-busting book. I think no matter what you like to read, you will love the Book of Doors. So, Gareth, if you would, could you tell our listeners where they can find you online, where they can look for updates on new work that you're putting out? And obviously, we will put a link to purchase the Book of Doors on Amazon in our show notes for anyone who wants to go check it out. But yeah, where can people find you and learn more about what you're doing and what you're up to?
I'm on Instagram, and that is usually pictures of either my dogs or book-related things. And I'm on Instagram as Gareth J. Brown, letter J, Brown like the colour, 13. I'm on Twitter under @GarethJohnBrown. And I have a website as well, which I think is garethbrownbooks.com or garethbrownbooks.co.uk, or both probably. And any of those places I'll put updates, but definitely on Instagram is probably where most of the updates will go at the moment.
Okay, and as we see updates, we'll probably try to reshare them to our stories as well,
Cool.
you guys. We'll have links to everything that Gareth just talked about in the show notes or in the description if you guys are looking for a quick link. And we just want to thank everyone for joining us today on the interview, and thank you so much, Gareth, for your
My
time.
pleasure.
Thank you for writing the Book of Doors.
Thank you for reading it.
Loved it.
Thank you.
And we can't wait for your next one coming in 2025.
July 2025. And paperback of Book of Doors, I think, is April in the US and January in the UK. So watch out for that as well. That will have a sneak preview of the next book at the end of it as well.
Okay, so exciting.
It's happening.
I have to look out for that in paperbacks. I get really trigger happy and I just like buy the hardback because I love it. And then I forget that there's always bonus content.
There is bonus content, yeah. And I think the UK paperback edition has a different cover to the hardback. I think they've taken one of the special edition covers. So if you're a completist, by all means, buy one as well.
Yes, I may have to. I feel like you've hit on something. I feel seen. I'm like, oh yes, I absolutely like to buy multiple versions of my favorite books.
All the best people do.
I do.
4 of one book.
I do.
There's no shame in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Gareth, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, bye
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.